What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Homie Hangout, where we help others move in excellence. I'm the homie Joshua, also known as Rascal. And today I'm going to talk about leadership versus management, right? And leaders versus managers. And I first kind of got introduced to this topic and started thinking about it and started learning about it while I was incarcerated. And um, and then found it interesting and would actually issue it as an essay prompt to folks down the line to help them kind of critique and explore this idea. Obviously, it has application outside of prison. So I think there's something here that we can all kind of learn from. And I did a little different in that I created a bit of a PowerPoint. So I'm going to share my screen to help kind of give the visual as we walk through these things. So here we go. Leadership, right? And these are just kind of some comparisons. It's not a matter of better or worse or right or wrong. It's just different, you know. Leadership, people follow leaders. People are under management, you know. Leaders, they tend to inspire and you'll see that as we go on. But leadership is as needed, right? And so it's an opportunity. It's when people need leadership. Whereas management is constant, right? It's 24/7, or it's the 8-hour workday or whatever. It's very hands-on. Leadership involves kind of influence more than power, so to speak, and it's more voluntary. And so you don't have to be a manager to be a leader. You don't have to have a title. You don't have to have a position. It's more about the role that you play, and it's voluntary. Not everybody is going to follow everyone else's leadership. You're only as successful of a leader as those who are actually following you. But it's not assigned in the same way that management is, where management is power, right? You are the authority figure over some individuals, and you are the manager because you have the title of manager, right? Or whatever the title is, but some management role. And so people don't have a choice but to follow, right? You're in charge, and if they want to work there or they want to be a part of the group or whatever, then they need to follow your management. Leadership tends to be outside the box, right? It's a little more questioning. It's more exploring, and we'll get into some of that. Where management is inside the box, you're maintaining the status quo. Leadership, you create or you improve things. How can we make this better, or how can we make something different? Whereas management is more about organizing, right? Organizing the people, organizing the steps, organizing the process to reach some set goal, right? Here's the things that need to happen piece by piece for us to get to this end. And so it's not as exploratory, so to speak. Leadership explores. They're a little more flexible, right? Leadership is, or leaders, there's room to be more creative. There's room to test, right? Test boundaries, challenge, right? Challenge the idea of hey, this is the way things are done. Well, why? Right? Why are they done that way? Can they be done a different way? Can they be done a better way? And you'll see that there's some crossover between this stuff, right? The questions that leaders tend to ask more often is what and why. Whereas management maintains. Again, they don't veer outside the box. They don't get creative. They just maintain the systems, right? And they may make changes and adjustments, of course, but they're within boundaries. And their job is just kind of make sure you don't sink the ship, right? Don't rebuild the ship. Don't decide where we're gonna go. Just make sure we don't sink it and it makes progress. And so management tends to ask the questions more of who and when, right? Who's going to do this? When is it going to be done? There's not a lot of room outside of that. So managers, there's a quote by this guy, John Fuller or Joe Fuller. He's a professor. He's an academic dude out of Harvard. And he said, management is getting the confused, misguided, unmotivated, and misdirected to accomplish a common purpose on a regular, recurring basis. So think about in a job site, right? The person that manages the warehouse, for example, they, you get a job at the warehouse, different people are at different skill levels, maybe things work certain ways at some warehouses and not others, but the manager, their job is keep everybody kind of motivated, right? Everybody on task, to have some kind of safety procedure set up, right? This is how we're going to do this properly. This is how we're going to meet our quota. And this is what we're going to do every day, right? For the most part. So the four essential functions of managers is plan, organize, lead, and control. So plan, for example, pies, right? These pies have to be eaten, right? That's the task, that's the goal. So organize, who gets what slices of pie, right? What tables do people sit at? You know what I mean? If these two people sit at a table, are they going to talk more than they're going to eat? If these people sit at a table, is one person going to take the other person's pie? And so kind of organize how you're going to reach the goal of all pies being eaten. They lead. Again, that's that kind of 24/7 thing. That's that oversight piece, right? Are people chewing with their mouth closed, right? Are people using napkins and keeping the station clean? That sort of thing. So what are the small steps and things that need to happen? And then also, are those things actually happening? And then control. Control is not just making sure people are on their task, but also like, hey, okay, I'm assigning all you guys to eat these slices of pizza. Am I making sure there's enough forks available, right? Are people getting too full, right? Is the workload too heavy? Does somebody need the day off, right? Because they have a family emergency, right? So managers would make those decisions. Managers still look at kind of what motivates people. If you think about a sports team manager, a baseball coach, for example, some people respond differently, and especially like with athletes, it's noticeable where some athletes, man, you got to get in their face, right? And what the hell's wrong with you? You're not focusing, kind of cussing them out and everything else, and that lights a fire under them, right? But if you do that to other athletes, you just break their whole spirit, man. They feel crushed. Some just need a real pat on the back. Hey, man, it didn't work out well this time, but you know what? You've been training, you've been practicing, man. Nobody bats 1,000, man. Don't trip. And that's the motivation they need. And so managers need to be aware of what motivates their people. But it's all for the purpose of accomplishing this goal, right? Leaders, there's a quote on leadership. Leadership is the creation of positive, non-incremental change. Non-incremental meaning not little step-by-step, small steps at a time, right? Including the creation of a vision to guide that change, right? In other words, a strategy. The empowerment of people to make the vision happen despite obstacles, and the creation of a coalition of energy and momentum that can move that change forward. So taking the whole pie example thing again, the elements of leadership is vision, right? Hey, let's make a new kind of pie. Let's do something different. Integrity, honesty, right? People following leaders want to know that their leader is dependable, that they're righteous, that they're upstanding. So, the leader makes sure to communicate, hey, I'm not giving up on you. I'm not giving up on the making of this pie. Like, I'm in it for the long haul, right? There's going to be bumps. There's going to be obstacles, but we're going to get through this, right? And we're going to make this happen. And you can count on me, right? I will lead by example. For instance, I will get involved. I'm in this fight with you, right? To some degree. Flexible, leaders have, the mindset and the ability to be a little more flexible with, hey, okay, this isn't working. Let's make a move on the fly. Managers generally don't get to do that, right? Sometimes a little bit, but for the most part, managers operate within an organized system, or they create some kind of organized system and make sure everybody operates within it. Leaders are kind of like, if this ain't working, let's try something new. And again, going back to the list, kind of let's explore, right? Leaders inspire. You know, we're gonna make this together, right? We're gonna make this pie. It's gonna be the best pie ever. Like, you guys are a part of something historic. We are doing something that's never been done before, and we can do that, right? And it needs to be done. We are doing the world a favor by making this new kind of pie, right? And it's gonna be the best pie. And so people are on board with it, and people are willing to do their part. Communicate. It's important for leaders to kind of check in with their folks, not micromanage them. That's management, right? But to check in with them in terms of hey, kind of how are we going, to get some feedback. That doesn't mean that you lead by democracy. That doesn't mean everybody has an equal voice or equal vote or anything like that. As the leader, you're still the one who sets the vision, right? So you don't want to be so wishy-washy, right? Real technical term, that the vision isn't grounded. You don't want to hand over the vision to everybody else and say, hey, let's recreate this. You want to come in with a vision, right? You have to come in with something to inspire folks. You define that light at the end of the tunnel. But you get input, you get feedback, and you value folks, right? You pick your team, you recognize the strengths of individuals on your team. There's a balance, right? And you bring in the best people who have skill sets that you don't have, right? You acknowledge your own kind of weaknesses, your own shortcomings. You acknowledge the areas that aren't really worth your time, right? So I'm really good at this, but I can find somebody else that's good at it, and then I can devote that time to something that's more within my skill set and that's more important, frankly. And so you communicate, and you also communicate in terms of like resources and what do we have? Do we have what we need, right? And hey, we hit a stumbling block, man. We've lost a little bit of money, so we're gonna have to kind of change gears or whatever. You keep them in the loop, right? There's this question that gets asked a lot. Are people born managers? Are people made leaders, right? Or are they born leaders? And you'll hear that phrase, that person's a born leader. They're a natural leader. And there is nothing really in history or data or science or research to suggest, or even really, if you think about it, kind of common sense, to suggest that people are just naturally great leaders or naturally great managers. So leaders, right? There's kind of three elements to this. And this is actually based off lessons that other folks have learned in studying Lincoln, right? So part of it is a combination of the nature nurture, right? What you have, the kind of skills and talent that you were just born with, right? But then also what you get along the road, right? What you learn, what you pick up, what kind of experiences you have, what people pour into you, right? It's a mix of both. It's not just, hey, I was born this way, so I don't need to take any input from anybody else. I don't need to work on this skill or this quality. I just got it. I got it in the bag. But there are some people that they would have to travel a longer road and pick up more things and be in more ideal situations in order for them to end up a good leader than others, right? Recognize the moment. So again, leadership is not about a title, it's about recognizing the moment where leadership is called for, and not just any leadership, but your leadership, right? This is a moment where I can step in and make a difference. And that could be as simple as breaking up a fight, right? Breaking up a conflict. You're at work, there's two employees that are kind of going at each other, this and that, and and there's no real end in sight, right? And if left alone, they're probably going to wind up boxing in the middle of the warehouse, right? And so, and that's not good for anybody, right? That's not good for the team. That's not good for them. That's not good for anybody. But you recognize what's going on, and you recognize that you have the leadership skills in that moment to kind of jump in and diffuse the situation. Not the power, not the assigned authority, right? You're not their manager. We're like, hey, fool, listen to me or else. But you take leadership. Other people are standing around, they're scared. They don't want to get in the mix of it. But you're like, no, man, I got this, right? So recognize the moment. Recognize the moment when morale in the room is low. You know what I mean? The managers just came in and kind of lit everybody up and threatened everybody with getting fired and everything else. And now people are freaking out, recognize when somebody is taking something real personal, and it's causing them to be really off their game. Notice on the yard when there's a fraction of people that are kind of pulling away, but in all those situations, it's not the same person is not necessarily the right person to jump in all those things. So it's not just recognizing a moment where leadership is needed. It's also recognizing it as a moment that you are equipped to handle. And then the last point is you got to have the heart to jump in, right? You got to take the risk of putting yourself out there. A lot of people are in situations where they're like, man, I could make a difference right here. But they don't have the confidence or for whatever other reason, they don't want to jump in. And so leaders are made by making that move and by buying into the cause, right? And the cause may be as simple as having a comfortable work environment, right? Having an environment where coworkers don't want to beat the hell out of each other, right? That might be the cause. The cause might be just not wanting to get negative attention, right? Man, I don't want the boss to come back in here and start flashing on people. So I need these two to calm down. Even though I really don't care if they kill each other, I don't want the heat of what's going on right now to impact me. So that's my cause. Or, hey, I'm trying to establish this mainline. Or hey, I'm trying to get a diverse group of people on the tier on the same page, right? The COs have been harassing all of us. They've been bullying all of us. And I think that I'm in the right position to kind of get everybody together and united with a focus. Think about the folks that did the end of hostilities. No matter what you think of it, but that was leadership, right? People they seized that moment, right? They recognized the moment in which something could be made to happen, and they recognize themselves as the person who could actually do that. It's a little more complicated in that sense because some people were assigned, but then they also accepted the calling. They accepted the task and they jumped in. Managers are more made by repetition, experience, and guidance. And so the more you do something, the better you get at it, right? The more you're managing a crew, the better you get at it. And so it's just pattern, right? It's a repetition. Also experience. You've been around a little bit. You've learned kind of what, how to recognize what makes people tick, and you've learned some ways to reach the goal more efficiently. And you've learned how to get people on track with that, right? To buy into that. And then guidance. You learn from other managers, right? You've been a student. You're not just a teacher. You've learned, you've watched people make mistakes. You accept input from people. And you don't just accept input from people of higher status than you, but you accept input from people that are of lower status than you, right? Because how the people who are being managed feel about their management is, at least in some part, a reflection on the management itself. So if you're management, if you're the manager, you want to get some direction, at least from the manpower, right? From the foot soldiers, so to speak. That doesn't mean they dictate the program, but you also don't want to be too authoritarian when it's not necessary. So it really is a combination of nature versus nurture, right? Closing thoughts. Told you guys it wouldn't be long. So managers and leaders are both valuable. They both play a role in organizations, in companies, in prison, whatever. A note on prison: there's actually very few real leaders in prison, and in particular when it comes to some of the larger prison organizations or gangs or whatever you want to call it. Now, there's a lot of managers, and some of those managers know how to be good leaders when it's called for, right? But sometimes we get this idea of, oh man, we're making leaders, and sometimes people can get carried away with that, right? Like, you need to know your role, you know. In prison, and I can speak specifically for the North, there's set ways of doing things, right? There's set expectations, there's set standards, there's set norms, and so you come into that environment, unless you're somebody of incredible stature, unless you're somebody of great authority and power, which is not many people, then essentially you're just being a manager, right? You're managing what's already there. And you might be able to make some little tweaks and changes, right? Because your experience as a manager has shown you that there's other ways to do things that are in fact consistent with the overall goal, and maybe more efficient, right? So that's cool. You can do that, but you can't go too outside the box, right? That's not your job. Your job fundamentally is to manage. And sometimes it requires you. Good managers are know when it's time to kind of be a leader, to be that inspirational person, and get people to buy in to what you're doing. But it's not your vision, right? It's a vision that's already been set out, and you're just managing the progress of that vision, which is an important distinction. So managers and leaders, you need to know when it's time to play what role, or you need to know what the expectations of your role is. You can have the capacity to be a great leader, but what you're being asked to do in that moment is not to lead, it is to manage. So just because people have told you you're a good leader, just because you think you're a good leader, just because you've demonstrated good leadership in situations, does not mean that you're always the leader. And it doesn't mean that you should always attempt to take a leadership role. Be content and be efficient at being a manager when that is your job. But that doesn't make you lesser. Being a manager doesn't mean that you're inferior to leaders. The best, most successful leaders, in fact, I would argue any leader, any really good leader of a group, at least, right? Whether it's a group in prison or a group in school or a group at work or your family group, or whatever it may be, requires great managers, right? Great leaders are made better by great managers, right? People that they can delegate to and that they can share the vision with. This is the vision. And those managers buy into the vision, and then they break it down into step-by-step processes to manifest that vision, which the leader is not necessarily occupied with. An example, there's somebody that's redesigning a logo for me, right? Which I'm very thankful for. And so homeboy reached out to me. It's actually his contact, but those details aren't important. Homeboy reaches out to me and he's like, hey man, do you, what do you want to be done to change? You know, are you open to this? Are you committed to this setup or that? Are you really bought into the Phoenix, or could it be something else? Are you committed to this color style? What you know, what are you kind of trying to do with this? What's going to be the application of this? And I'm the one with the vision for this platform, right? It's an informed vision that's in part informed by you guys and other folks, but it's my vision. I'm the leader of the Homie Hangout, right? Um, and so I have some ideas. I know the direction, right? Hey, I need a logo that works as a thumbnail and works as a sticker and works on merchandise and that I can adjust the size and not lose the quality and that sort of thing, because I envision something. I'm building a brand. So I know that's the kind of logo I need. I I feel like there should be a symbol. I like the Phoenix for these reasons, but I'm not an artist. I'm open to other ideas, right? Uh, I'm not committed to the color spectrum. There's some colors that I don't want to use because I don't want to, you know, give the wrong impression in terms of what this platform is and who this platform is open to, right? Um, but no, so I'm not micromanaging it. Why? Because logo creation is not my strong suit, right? I'm not an artist. I don't do that stuff. And so I just shared the vision, right? Now this other person is going to turn that into something. And so I delegated, but I didn't delegate step by step. Hey, bro, I want to use this font and this size and do this and do that. And you just put those pieces together and give me the end result. I took more, that would be managing. I took more of a leader approach in, here's the vision. I'm sharing it with you. Okay, I understand the vision. I get where you're going with that. Awesome, bro. Let's see what you come up with. Right now, when they come up with something, then we're gonna kind of meet minds, and I might see stuff and have some questions, and we'll kind of go back and forth. Maybe I'll just love it right away. Who knows? Um, but so, you know, there's a difference there, right? Again, leadership and management are circumstantial. There there was this guy. He was this leader on this expedition to Antarctica or whatever, right? And he's the leader. He had management underneath him, but he was the leader, right? He charted the course, his vision, blah blah blah. Well, they get in a wreck because now everybody's just kind of floating around in the water, and there's sharks. Everybody's dangerous, and all hell breaks loose, right? And so this dude wasn't normally a day-to-day manager. You know, he handed off tasks to his managers. You know, he was more in the high-minded shit. But in this case, he really had to step up and also be a manager, right? And say, hey man, look, the folks on this raft, Johnny, you're gonna do laundry today. And you know, Joe, you're gonna keep an eye out for planes for the next hour. And this person, you're gonna do that. And gave them all a task, right? Something to somewhat get their mind off it, and something to make them feel like there was progress being made, right? And gave them a job, you know, gave them an important role rather than everybody just sitting there freaking out, panicking, right? So people got a little bit more grounded. He managed them, he micromanaged them, and but that's circumstantial. There's other people who, again, they're leaders in the moment because that's what the moment calls for. Some great leaders and managers don't have good style, and good style doesn't necessarily make a great leader and manager. So when the best example of this, I think, or the easiest one for me is people's communication style, right? People's verbals, people's rhetorical skills, people's mouthpiece, right? However you want to put it. There's some people that got the gift of gab, right? And they could be very persuasive with their words because of their style, right? That doesn't mean that they're good leaders or good managers, right? Because what are they persuading you to? Are are they creating a fan club for themselves, right? So are they aspiring people to follow them, but they're not necessarily going anywhere? They're just inspiring them to follow them as a personality, but there's no real direction, right? So it's just 100% ego driven. It's not mission focused. The mission is the satisfaction of the ego. Leaders, there's always a little bit of ego involved, but it has to be a balance between what kind of makes me feel good about who I am and what I'm doing, but also serves a bigger purpose, serves another goal. That's great leaders. And so you can have great verbals and not really be leading anybody anywhere. You can have great verbals, but be a poor manager. You don't know how to assign tasks. You really don't pay close enough attention. You don't watch over people. You don't hold them accountable, right? So that's not a very good manager. You get people all worked up, but that's about all you got. But there are also people that are great leaders and great managers who don't really have that style, that charisma, you know? Steve Jobs is considered a great leader, right? A huge visionary, the dude that ran Apple. But he's also regarded as kind of a jerk, right? Kind of an asshole. And so how did he become this great leader? It's his skill set. He had a particular skill set that was so central to the vision, right? He was a programmer, he was a designer, right? And he was so good at that. And design was so much a core part of what Apple was doing and where he wanted to take Apple, that folks looked up to him and followed him, even though he didn't have no bedside manners, right? Even though he wasn't very friendly necessarily, but people didn't sign up for friendly. People signed up to be a part of something that was visionary, and he had that vision. Sometimes managers are a little bit better when they're kind of dry, right? They don't get too high, they don't get too low. They're kind of, kind of mellow, kind of even keel. And workers, manpower, they appreciate that most of the time. A lot of times, because it's stability. It's not super exciting, it's not super flashy, but it's stable, right? And flashy and excited can sometimes lead to anxiety in other people, right? Like, but that's a whole lot, and a lot of times those that go up real high, they also kind of dive down real low, or they have an off day where they're level. But because they're never really level, they're always on 10. When they're level, it's almost like they're depressed, and it throws the team off. Excuse me. So sometimes managers, sometimes the best managers aren't the most charismatic people. They also don't know the systems. Think of like bean counters, accountants, that sort of stuff. They're a necessary part of any successful business, right? Especially a large one. They don't tend to be the life of the party, but they understand those numbers. They understand that bookkeeping. They understand finances, and they manage that stuff, and they manage the people around them when it comes to that. Hey man, you got to do your invoices this way. Hey, I need these things on these days, right? Hey, you can't have that expense because of this. Hey, we're losing a chance to write off some stuff over here, right? And probably none of that is going to be communicated with a huge smile, but they're damn good at what they do. You might want to, you might not want to invite them to the bar or to the barbecue, but they're good. Lastly, pause is sometimes the best play. In this age of management and leadership and all these books and everything else on how to be a better leader and how to be a better manager, which is a lot of basically what I have here, just recycled in different language. There also seems to be this rush of like, I have to be decisive, right? Good managers, good leaders, especially, they make decisions. When something's presented, they know what to do and they do it and they stick with that, right? And that's the sign of a good leader. Okay, but include the idea of pressing play as the best, pressing pause as the best decision. because sometimes you need more information. Sometimes it's the heat of the moment, right? Not many people would argue against the idea that Abraham Lincoln was an incredible leader. Whatever you think of his politics, whatever you think of him, whatever. But just in terms of leader, the dude was an inspirational leader. He had a vision. He gained a following, right? Um, Folks didn't just follow him because he was the president and he managed people. He was a bona fide leader. So it's a story that I actually just heard about today, but there's a story of this dude. I think his name was Meade, and he was the head of the army, right? The Northern Army in the Civil War, and uh, they had just won. I think it was like Gettysburg or something, right? They just won the battle at Gettysburg against Robert E. Lee in the South. Barely won, but they won. And so this dude Meade, the general, right? He shoots a kite to Lincoln, and he tells Lincoln, "Hey man, even though we got these fools, but we're not gonna pursue what's left of Robert E. Lee and his army, as they run away, because the soldiers are tired, man. They're tired, and so we ain't chasing them, bro." And Lincoln was pissed, right? Like he was pissed, and he writes out this letter that you can still find online. He writes out this letter and he rips this dude a new one, right? Just tears into his ass, and the type of for those that have been in prison, sometimes you've been reprimanded on paper, right? And or you get a filter that's very strongly worded, and you can almost see the person as they're writing it, even though you're just reading it, but you could tell like, damn, this fool means business. And that's how this letter is from Lincoln. But he never sent it. The way that we have that letter is after he was dead, after he died, it was found in his desk after he was killed. And it's dated and everything, but he never signed it. And he never sent it. He pressed pause because in the heat of the moment, and he wasn't necessarily wrong in his assessment, but as a good leader, he recognized, if I flash on this dude and I really give him a piece of my mind, that's going to demoralize him. That's going to cause a bit of a fracture. He might just fucking dip and quit, right? And I don't have nobody else. And he is a good general, right? I don't like this choice, but he's a good general, man. We just won at Gettysburg. Like, the dude is good at what he does. And I can't afford the vision can't afford to lose him right now. I don't have anybody else as good as him to put in his place. So I'm gonna have to pull back, right? And press pause. That's smart leadership. That's smart management, actually. So lastly, it's okay to be lucky. It's okay to be smart. It is not okay to be lucky and think you're smart. Know your role, right? Luck is a part of stuff. Being wise, being smart is a part of stuff. But sometimes people are lucky and they think that they're smart. Just because you learned at a young age how to hit a tennis ball, right? And you practice, you demonstrated, man, you became a world-class tennis player. That doesn't mean that that that's not a good example. I take that back. That has more to do with management and circumstances. So scratch that analogy. My bad. I'm glad it's at the end of the video. But sometimes people find themselves in a situation where all the pieces just fall together, right? You happen to pull up on a yard, and yes, okay, you're in leadership on that yard, but everybody on the yard is sharp, and it's a well-functioning yard. It's a well-oiled machine, right? And so yeah, you maintain it, but it's not really a lot of work, right? And in some way, you're kind of lucky, right? Because you could have ended up someplace else where the challenges were much different. So don't go somewhere else and feel like I'm gonna take charge, right? It's you were lucky the last time. Don't mistake that as being smart. My older brother Trigger, he he went to prison, and his first main line was Jamestown, right? And this is before it was, S&Y stuff. This is many years ago, but it was a soft yard, right? They had people on the yard. It's a general population, but they had people on the yard that normally folks from the north would not program it. And he went there and basically did his time however he pleased, right? If he felt like beating somebody up, he beat him up. If he wanted to get loaded, he got loaded. He talked to who he wanted, didn't talk to who he wanted, and kind of puffed his chest out. And he's a big guy. He's a violent guy. He can be an intimidating guy. And so he did his time like Debo, right? And he came home. Him and I came home about the same amount of time. He had 6 years. I had 10. And so we came home around the same time. And he's telling me about this experience. And I'm like, bro, that ain't prison, homie. Like, I love you, but I'm glad you never pulled up on my yard. Because if somebody like you pulled up on my yard, you'd have gone, nah, fool, they couldn't get rid of me. They this, that, this, whatever. I did whatever I wanted to, right? Okay, I'm gonna send a couple people with knives, bro, and run something in you. You're gonna get off the yard. I'll smash them and take the knife. Okay, maybe, but you're still gonna leave the yard. The yard's gonna get laid down. You're gonna go be somebody else's headed, right? But just so you know, that's not how prison works. Man, who you telling? I just did years. I just did all these years in prison. I was there, bro. How you gonna tell me? Okay. What happens when he goes back to prison? It's not smiled upon where you paroled from, right? Now there's questions. Now there's criticism. Now there's a side eye, right? You were lucky, bro. You weren't smart. Right. And that's okay. It's okay to be lucky. It's okay to pull up on a yard like that. It's your first term. You don't know no better. You do your time there. That's fine. Right. You're not being very smart, but you're lucky. Right. And that's cool. I would try really hard not to go back to prison. And it's okay to be smart, obviously, but be careful that you don't think you're super smart when in reality you were super lucky, because that's how you get in a wreck. And that applies to jobs. That applies to all over the place. You see huge Fortune 500 companies that pull CEOs from other huge companies, right? And they poach them. They go recruit them, from other companies. And people are like, wow, this person ran this airline so well. Now that they work for this financial institution, they're going to really fix it. And they tank, right? You were in a situation where, yes, you were smart, but you were also kind of lucky because you had all the pieces you needed to be able to be the person that you grew to be. That doesn't mean you're so smart that you can recreate that anywhere that you go. There's a matter of circumstance, right? As I've said through. Anyways, I hope you guys got something out of this, man. It's my first time doing something quite like this with this setup. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your feedback. What worked for you, what didn't work for you, and what other topics you might want to see me cover in this way. Help others move in excellence. That's what homies do. Help yourself at the same time because you're worth it, and help your community, man, because they need you. Check out the other content. There's all sorts of stuff, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Take care.